An arrogant jerk at the hospital who demanded I give up my seat just because she didn't feel like standing, while I'm an amputee who served in the military and nearly died in a bomb accident. Yeah, you heard that right. A showdown with a neighborhood HOA Karen tyrant that ends in chaos you won't believe. Smash that like button right now. It really helps me out, and I'd appreciate it big time. Let's dive in. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee, the kind of scent that clings to your clothes long after you've left. I'd been there enough times to know the drill. Check in, sit down, wait forever. That day, though, the place was buzzing like a beehive kicked over by a clumsy kid. People shuffled in and out, some clutching their arms, others coughing into their sleeves. The chairs were mostly taken, but I'd snagged one near the corner, a little victory for a guy who'd learned to appreciate the small stuff after everything I'd been through. I leaned back, resting my crutch against the armrest, and let my eyes drift shut. Military life had taught me one golden rule: sleep when you can, where you can. I nodded off in worse places, dusty desert tents, rattling Humvees, even once on a pile of ammo crates with the wind howling like a pack of wolves. A hospital chair? That was luxury. The hum of voices and the occasional beep of a machine faded into a dull roar as I slipped into that sweet, shallow doze. I wasn't out long before a sharp jolt yanked me back to reality. Pain shot through my thigh, hot and jagged, like someone had jabbed me with a rusty nail. My eyes snapped open, and there she was, Linda, the HOA manager from my neighborhood, standing over me with a scowl that could curdle milk. I'd seen her plenty of times before, barking orders at folks about their lawn decorations or mailbox colors. She had that air about her like she owned the world, and everyone in it owed her a favor. "Hey, you alive?" she snapped, her voice cutting through the room like a chainsaw. She gave my leg another smack with the back of her hand, right where the prosthetic met what was left of my thigh. I winced, biting back a curse. "Get up. I need that seat." I blinked, still half-dazed, trying to process what was happening. The waiting room had gotten even busier while I was out, folks standing along the walls now, but Linda wasn't looking at them. She was zeroed in on me, hands on her hips, like I'd personally insulted her by existing. "Linda, hold up," I said, keeping my tone even. Years in the service had drilled patience into me, even when I didn't feel like it. "I'm an amputee. Standing's not exactly easy for me." Her eyes narrowed, flicking to the crutch propped beside me. For a second, I thought she'd back off. Most people would, right? See the crutch, the limp, and figure it out. Not Linda. She snorted, loud enough that a couple heads turned our way. "Oh, please. You don't look crippled to me. What, you just lazy or something? Give me the chair." I took a slow breath, the kind you take when you're counting to 10 in your head. "Look, I lost my leg in the Army. This isn't a prop. It's a prosthetic. I need to sit." That should have been the end of it. Should have. But Linda wasn't most people. Her face twisted, like I just told her the sky was green. "Lost your leg? Yeah, right. You're full of it. I've seen guys like you, faking it for sympathy, hogging all the good spots. Get up now." The room went quiet, or maybe it just felt that way with her voice ringing in my ears. I could have stood, well, hobbled, out of spite, but my leg was already throbbing from her little wake-up call. Plus, I wasn't in the mood to play nice with someone who'd clearly never heard the word no before. "Linda, I'm not moving. I've got an appointment, same as you. Wait your turn." Her jaw dropped, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, surprise, maybe, or the realization she wasn't getting her way. Then it was gone, replaced by a fire I'd only seen in drill sergeants chewing out rookie. She leaned in close, her breath hot with coffee and entitlement. "You're gonna regret that, buddy. I run the HOA. I make the rules around here. You don't tell me what to do." I almost laughed. Almost. "This ain't your HOA meeting, Linda. It's a hospital. Sit down or stand, your call." That's when the switch flipped. Her face went red, veins popping in her neck like little road maps. She straightened up, hands balled into fists, and let out a yell that echoed off the walls. "How dare you? Get your lazy ass out of my chair, you liar." Heads turned. Phones came out. And me? I just sat there, wondering how a simple trip for an x-ray had turned into a showdown with the neighborhood tyrant. I had no idea it was about to get a whole lot worse. The waiting room felt like a pressure cooker about to blow, and Linda was the steam hissing out the top. Her voice bounced off the walls, sharp and shrill, cutting through the low hum of chatter. "Liar! You're a damn liar!" she shouted, pointing at me like I'd just stolen her last time. People were staring now, some wide-eyed, others pretending not to notice while sneaking glances over their magazines. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, not from embarrassment. Years in the Army had beaten that out of me, but from the sheer absurdity of it all. "Linda, calm down," I said, keeping my hands on the armrests, steadying myself. "I'm not faking anything. I lost my leg in an accident. You can see the crutch, right?" She didn't even glance at it. Her eyes were locked on me, wild and unhinged, like a dog that had slipped its leash. "Oh, don't give me that sob story. You think you're special because you've got a stick to lean on? I've been on my feet all day dealing with idiots who don't mow their lawns right. I deserve that seat." I opened my mouth to argue, something about how mowing lawns didn't exactly trump a missing limb, but she didn't give me the chance. She lunged forward, faster than I'd have given her credit for, and grabbed my good leg. Her nails dug into my calf through my cargo pants, and she yanked hard, like she was trying to drag me off the chair by sheer willpower. "Get off me!" I barked, my voice finally cracking with the frustration I'd been holding back. The jolt sent a spike of pain up my bad leg, the stump throbbing where the prosthetic socket hugged it. I gripped the chair tighter, trying to keep my balance, but Linda wasn't letting up. She tugged again, harder this time, and I could feel the prosthetic shifting under my pants. "Let go, Linda! What the hell's wrong with you?" I swatted at her hands, but she was relentless, a tornado in a cheap blazer. The room was a blur of gasps and murmurs now. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Another voice hissed, "Call security." I caught a glimpse of a guy in the corner, fumbling with his phone, probably recording the whole mess. Great. Just what I needed. My own personal viral moment. Then she switched targets. Her hands flailed toward my other leg, the fake one, and before I could react, she got a grip on it. With one vicious pull, she ripped the prosthetic clean off. The socket popped loose with a sickening thunk, and the sudden release sent a wave of agony through me, like someone had lit a match under my skin. I bit down hard, tasting metal in my mouth, and the world tilted for a second. "There. See? Fake," Linda crowed, holding my leg up like some twisted trophy. The room erupted, shouts, a scream, a kid crying somewhere in the back. My prosthetic dangled from her hand, the sleek metal and carbon fiber glinting under the fluorescent lights. It was surreal, like watching a bad movie where I was the unwilling star. I couldn't even yell. The pain was too much, a deep, gnawing ache that clawed up my thigh and into my gut. My stomach churned, threatening to turn inside out. "You're insane," I managed to choke out, clutching the chair to keep from sliding off. "Give it back. Fake veteran." "I knew it," she screeched, waving the leg around. "My nephew's in the reserves, and he'd never pull this crap." She took a step closer, raising the prosthetic like she was about to swing it at me. That's when the cavalry finally showed up. 2 security guards burst through the double doors, their boots squeaking on the linoleum. "Ma'am, drop it!" One of them yelled, a big guy with a buzz cut and a no-nonsense glare. Linda spun toward them, still clutching my leg, her face a mask of fury. "He's faking it. Arrest him." The second guard, a wiry woman with a ponytail, grabbed Linda's arm, trying to wrestle the prosthetic free. It turned into a tug of war, Linda shrieking like a banshee while the guards barked orders. I just sat there, breathing hard, the pain pulsing in time with my heartbeat. My vision blurred at the edges, and I could feel something rising in my throat, bile panic, maybe both. Then it hit me. The pain, the shock, the sheer ridiculousness of Linda swinging my own leg at me. It was too much. My stomach gave up the fight, and before I could stop it, I leaned forward and puked. Right on her. A glorious, Technicolor mess splattered across her blazer and face, cutting her screams short. She froze, mouth gaping, dripping with what I'd had for breakfast. The guard stared. The room went dead silent. And me? I slumped back, wiped my mouth, and thought, well, that's one way to shut her up. The silence in the waiting room didn't last long. Linda's stunned gasp turned into a howl. a mix of rage and disgust that could have woken the dead. She stood there, dripping with my breakfast, her blazer now a canvas of regret. The security guards snapped out of their shock, the big guy grabbing her arms while the wiry one pried my prosthetic from her grip. It hit the floor with a dull clatter, and I winced, not from the pain this time, but from seeing my leg treated like a discarded toy. "Get her out of here," the big guard barked, wrestling Linda toward the doors. She thrashed like a fish on a hook, spitting curses and bits of vomit. "He attacked me. I'm the victim. I'll sue this whole damn place." Her voice faded as they dragged her down the hall, leaving a trail of chaos in her wake. The wiry guard knelt beside me, picking up my prosthetic with a gentleness that felt out of place after all that. "You okay, man?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. She held it out to me, and I took it, my hands shaking more than I'd like to admit. "Not really," I muttered, wiping my mouth again with the back of my sleeve. My stump was screaming, a deep ache that no amount of grit could ignore. The room spun a little, faces blurring into a sea of stares. A nurse rushed over, her sneakers squeaking, and crouched beside me. "Sir, we need to get you checked out. Can you stand?" I shook my head, clutching the prosthetic to my chest like a shield. "Not yet. Just give me a minute." My stomach was still doing flips, and the last thing I wanted was to keel over in front of everyone. The nurse nodded, her eyes flicking to the mess on the floor. "Okay, stay put. I'll get a wheelchair." As she darted off, the crowd started buzzing again. Whispers, a few nervous laughs, someone muttering about crazy people these days. I caught snippets of it, but my head was too foggy to care. All I could think about was the pain and how a routine x-ray had turned into a circus. Linda's face flashed in my mind, twisted with that HOA boss entitlement, and I wondered how someone could be so blind to the world outside her little kingdom. The nurse came back with a wheelchair, and between her and the wiry guard, they got me into it. My leg, or what was left of it, throbbed with every move, but I bit down and let them wheel me through the double doors, away from the gawking eyes. The hallway was quieter, cooler, the antiseptic smell sharper here. They took me to a small exam room, the kind with a paper-covered bed and a sink that always drips. The nurse helped me onto the bed, and I leaned back, closing my eyes as the world settled. A doctor came in not long after, a guy with tired eyes and a clipboard. "Heard you had quite the run-in out there," he said, flipping through my chart. "Let's take a look at that stump. Make sure nothing's damaged." I nodded, letting him do his thing. He peeled back the sleeve of my pants, checking the skin where the prosthetic usually sat. It was red, raw, a little swollen. Nothing broken, but it'd be sore for days. "You're lucky," he said, scribbling something down. "No tears or serious bruising. We'll get you some pain meds and do that x-ray you came for. Anything else happen?" I snorted, a dry laugh escaping me. "Yeah, I threw up on her. Couldn't help it." He smirked, shaking his head. "Can't say I blame you. Sounds like she had it coming." They hooked me up with saline and a dose of morphine, the good stuff that dulled the edges of the pain and made the room feel softer. I drifted for a while, half listening as nurses came and went. At some point, a cop showed up, stocky, with a buzz cut and a notepad. "Mind telling me what happened?" he asked, pen poised. I ran through it all, Linda's demands, the leg yanking, the puke finale. He scribbled notes, nodding along, his face unreadable. "She's claiming you assaulted her," he said when I finished. "Says you faked the whole thing for attention." "Of course she did," I said, rolling my eyes. "Check the security cameras. Half the waiting room probably filmed it too. I'm not the one swinging a prosthetic like a baseball bat." He grunted, tucking the notepad away. "We'll look into it. She's cooling off and holding for now. You pressing charges." I thought about it. The morphine haze making everything feel distant. Linda deserves something, jail, a fine, a reality check. "Yeah," I said finally. "She crossed the line. I want her to answer for it." The cop nodded and left, promising to follow up. As the door clicked shut, I stared at the ceiling, the hum of the hospital settling around me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Linda wasn't the type to go quietly, and I had a feeling I'd be seeing her again, one way or another. The morphine did its job, smoothing out the jagged edges of the pain until it was just a dull hum in the background. I lay there on the exam room bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the little black specks to keep my mind off Linda and her rampage. The x-ray came back clean, no bone slicing through muscle, no new damage to fix. Just a sore stump and a story I'd be telling for years. The doctor sent me home with a prescription for painkillers and a pat on the shoulder, like I'd survived a bar fight instead of a hospital brawl. Getting out of there was a relief. The nurse wheeled me to the exit, my prosthetic tucked under my arm like a spare part. I called a buddy from the old unit to pick me up. Didn't feel like wrestling with a cab while my leg was still screaming. He showed up in his beat-up truck, grinning through the window. "Heard you took down an HOA dragon with your lunch," he said as I climbed in, prosthetic and all. Something like that. I muttered, managing a half-smile. We didn't talk much on the drive, just the rumble of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. My place wasn't far, a little house on the edge of the neighborhood Linda ruled like her personal fiefdom. I'd picked it for the quiet, not the HOA politics, but she'd made sure I knew who was in charge from day one. Fines for my mailbox being too faded, notes about my grass being a quarter-inch too long. Now this. Back home, I hobbled inside, propped the prosthetic against the couch, and sank into the cushions. The silence was golden, no shouting, no chaos, just the tick of the clock on the wall. I popped a painkiller, washed it down with a glass of water, and let my head tip back. Sleep came fast, pulling me under like a riptide. It was a couple days later when the phone rang, jolting me out of a nap. My leg was still tender, but the meds kept it manageable. I fumbled for the receiver, expecting a telemarketer or maybe my buddy checking in. Instead, it was the cop from the hospital, his voice clipped and businesslike. "Got an update for you," he said. "We reviewed the footage. Clear as day. Linda attacked you, unprovoked. Witnesses back it up too. She's facing assault charges." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Good. She say anything?" He chuckled, dry and humorless. "Oh, plenty. Claims you provoked her, faked the disability, the works. Even said you threw up on her on purpose. But the video doesn't lie. She's in deep." "What's next?" I asked, shifting to sit up straighter. "Court date's set for next month. You'll need to testify if you want to push it. She's out on bail, though. Judge didn't see her as a flight risk. Thought you should know." I thanked him and hung up, the words rattling around in my head. Linda out on bail, probably back at her HOA throne, plotting her next move. I wasn't worried about her coming after me. Not directly, anyway. She'd made too big a scene to try that again. But I knew her type. She'd spin this, twist it into some victim sob story for the neighborhood newsletter. Poor Linda, attacked by the rude veteran. I could already see it. Sure enough, a week later, the mailbox had a crisp white envelope with the HOA logo stamped on it. Inside was a letter, typed up all official-like, signed by Linda herself. Due to recent events, it read, "We're conducting a review of resident conduct. Please ensure your property meets all HOA standards to avoid penalties." No mention of the hospital, the leg, the puke, just a veiled jab, her way of saying she wasn't done with me. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. She could play her games, but I wasn't biting. I'd dealt with worse than Linda in the desert. Sandstorms, IDs, nights so dark you couldn't see your own hands. This was just noise. Still, I wasn't about to let slide. The military had left me with a decent chunk of compensation money, tucked away for a rainy day. This felt like a downpour. I dug through my desk, found the car of a lawyer I'd met years back, a sharp guy who'd handled a buddy's discharge case. I dialed him up, explained the whole mess, Linda, the hospital, the charges, the HOA nonsense. "Sounds like a slam dunk," he said, his voice crackling with confidence. "Assault's one thing, but if she's harassing you through the HOA, we can hit her with more. You want to go after her?" I thought about it, picturing Linda's smug face when she'd ripped my leg off, the way she'd waved it like a flag. "Yeah," I said. "Let's make her pay." He laughed. "My kind of client. I'll start the paperwork. Sit tight." I hung up, leaning back with a grin. Linda had picked the wrong fight. She thought she ruled the world, but I'd learned a thing or two about standing my ground. This wasn't over. Not until she learned that some battles you just don't win. The courtroom smelled like old wood and lemon polish, a far cry from the hospital's antiseptic sting. I sat in the front row, my prosthetic back where it belonged, though the socket still pinched a little from Linda's stunt. The place was quiet, just the rustle of papers and the judge's low murmur as he flipped through the case file. My lawyer sat beside me, tapping his pen against his notepad, cool as a cucumber. Me? I was calm too. Years of facing down chaos had a way of steadying your nerves. Linda was across the room, perched at the defendant's table, her blazer swapped for a stiff gray suit that didn't quite fit. She kept shooting me glares, her lips pursed like she'd sucked on a lemon. No HOA minions to back her up here. Just her, and the truth, she couldn't bully into submission. The security footage had already played on a grainy screen. Her yanking my leg off, waving it around, then the glorious moment I'd painted her with my breakfast. The room had gone dead silent then, a few jurors even wincing. Linda's lawyer tried to spin it, said she'd been provoked, but the judge's frown told me he wasn't buying it. When it was my turn, I took the stand, crutch clicking against the floor as I moved. The questions were straightforward. What happened, how it felt, what it cost me. I kept it simple. She demanded my seat, wouldn't take no for an answer, and ripped my prosthetic off. Hurt like hell. I've been sore for weeks, and I'm tired of her thinking she can run over people. No embellishment, just the facts. The jury listened, heads tilted, some scribbling notes. Linda's turn was a circus. She stood up there, voice quivering with fake tears, claiming I'd insulted her first, that I'd escalated things. He's a troublemaker, she insisted, jabbing a finger my way. Always breaking HOA rules, disrespecting authority. My lawyer didn't even flinch, just stood up and played the tape again, letting her own actions bury her. The puking part got a stifled laugh from the back, and Linda's face went beet red. The verdict came fast. Guilty of assault. The judge didn't mince words. 6 months in jail, a hefty fine, and a restraining order to keep her away from me. Linda's jaw dropped, her lawyer scrambling to object, but it was done. As they let her out, she twisted to glare at me one last time, muttering something I couldn't catch. I just nodded back, calm as ever. She'd dug her own grave. I just handed her the shovel. The fine wasn't the end of it. My lawyer had another trick up his sleeve. Using that compensation money from the Army, we'd filed a civil suit. Pain and suffering, harassment, the works. Linda's HOA gig didn't pay much, but she had savings and we went after them. A month later, I got a check in the mail, enough to cover the lawyer fees and then some. I didn't need the cash, not really, but it felt good knowing she'd lost something she valued. Karma's funny that way. The neighborhood shifted after that. Word spread fast. Linda was gone, locked up, her HOA crown snatched away. A new manager took over, a quiet guy who didn't care about mailbox shades or grass length. People started nodding at me when I passed. A few even stopping to chat. Heard you took down the dragon lady, one neighbor said, grinning over his fence. I just shrugged. She took herself down. I just stayed out of the way. Life settled back into a rhythm. The legs still ached sometimes, but the painkillers helped, and I got better at tuning out the memory of Linda screeching. I'd sit on my porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the trees, the quiet wrapping around me like a blanket. The HOA letters stopped coming, and the mailbox stayed faded. Nobody cared. One night, my buddy from the truck swung by with a couple beers. We sat out back, the crickets chirping, and he raised his bottle. To winning the war, he said, clinking it against mine. I laughed, the first real one in a while. Wasn't much of a war. Just a loudmouth who didn't know when to quit. He smirked. Still, you came out on top. That's what counts. I took a sip, the cold fizz cutting through the warm air. He was right. Linda had swung hard, but I'd stood my ground. Not with fists or shouts, but with the stubbornness I'd learned in the desert. She wanted to fight, but I'd given her a lesson. You don't mess with someone who's already been through hell and come out the other side. As the stars popped out overhead, I leaned back, letting the day's weight slip away. The battle was over, the dragon slain. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like the quiet was mine to keep. The dust settled, and the quiet returned. Linda was gone. Jail, fines, and a bruised ego her only trophies. I sat on my porch, beer in hand, watching the stars blink awake. The neighborhood felt lighter, like it could breathe again. I'd faced bombs and chaos overseas, but this was a different kind of victory, standing firm against someone who thought the world owed her everything. Life's too short for bullies like Linda. You don't have to fight every battle with fists. Sometimes it's about holding your ground, letting the truth do the work. Respect isn't a gift you demand. It's something you earn. So, next time someone tries to push you down, remember this. You've got more strength than they'll ever know. Stand tall, keep your cool, and let karma handle the rest. Thanks for listening. See you in the next story.